the question I leave with you is, are you going to let it own you or are you going to own it? Whilst I back myself in terms of my, confidence and conviction, there was a lot that needed colouring in between.
Can you give me an example of a time where that's gotten you into trouble and you've had to grow from it?
Absolutely, and fantastic question. And it's one word, it's belief. I'm okay with not hitting 100%, but at least if you set the bar relatively high and get near it, your benchmark will be way higher than other people. How do you answer that without sounding really pompous?
Welcome back, everybody, to another special episode of the Growth Distillery, where I've been joined by some of the brilliant minds across marketing and advertising in partnership with the Marketing Academy to explore our unfiltered selves. I am super excited to be joined by Chris Murphy, or Murph, who is the General Manager at The Hallway. Prior to your time at The Hallway, Murph has had a raft of senior leadership roles at really prestigious agencies, including Saatchi & Dentsu, and has a really active mentorship role supporting junior staff across creative and advertising in terms of their career development. So I think a really interesting space to have a chat about as well. Welcome, mate, to the show. Wonderful to have you. What I've just gone through is what we call the A side to the story. What I'd love to hear from you and I'd love for you to share with us is, what's the B side? Give us a little bit of information, or, a lot of information about yourself.
Absolutely. And Dan, thank you so much for having me
you're very welcome.
on board today. Super excited to get into it, especially the B side.
Yep.
And I think the best place for us to start really is at the very beginning.
Okay.
So for context, I was born in the Middle East, in Abu Dhabi in particular.
Yep.
To a British father and a Filipino mother, eldest of three.
Yeah.
And lived there till I was 18 and then moved to the UK. So I've kind of from everywhere and nowhere.
Yeah.
But I think where I'd like to start this story really is in school. Mm-hmm. And quite frankly, I hated school. I was, not because, teachers were strict or anything, but I just wasn't very good at it. I struggled a lot with academically, mainly. And further to that, at the time I wasn't in the best shape. So I kind of struggled with sports as well, which broke my heart because I loved sports growing up. But a really defining moment for me was figuring out why I couldn't, why was I struggling so much? Why was this so much harder for me than every other kid in there? And the epiphany didn't really happen until I was about 15 when I was officially diagnosed with dyslexia.
Oh, wow.
So everything right up to that was just, it's just a bit thick, it's a bit slow, or he's lazy, or all that sort of stuff. But really, that was a turning point for me, and I'll never forget what the psychologist said. And she said, look, dyslexia, she actually defined it as and I'm probably going to butcher the official definition, but hey, here we go. And it's basically it's a disorder that causes difficulty in reading, spelling, kind of comprehension, things like that. But it doesn't affect your overall intelligence. And she was like, Richard Branson, Albert Einstein, all these amazing people. I'm not comparing myself to them, but all these amazing people have gone on to do amazing things despite this. So, Chris, the question I leave with you is, are you going to let it own you or are you going to own it? And I was like, it's quite a profound thing to be confronted with at such a young age, at 15. But that was when everything really took a turn for me. And I started believing, if they can do it, I can do it. I don't know why I thought that, but it was just the attitude that I'd always had. And so what happened was I just started to believe. I just started to believe that I could be as good as I wanted to. As a result of me becoming the sort of person I wanted to be, which was at the time through school, academically good at sport, everything like that. I wouldn't say it was manifesting, but because of me believing in myself, it changed everything. I got in shape. I got in, not that it's kind of like being a 12-year-old being like, oh my God, I need to get in shape. But everything just seemed to fall in place down.
Yeah.
And it was amazing. And I went from being a kid who at 10 years old was told he wasn't really going to amount to much to someone who went on to university, which for me seemed impossible. I then went on to get a master's degree at first, which then seemed impossible. Yeah. I then went on from being nothing wrong with where I went to uni, Hull, big up Hull, but it seemed so far away that I could get a job in a top tier agency in London. Yet the first job I got was at Grey London when all the absolute guns were there, like Nils Leonard and co. So I thought, oh my God, and with every win I got, the more confident I got, the more ambitious I got. And it's just something that I've carried throughout my career, more and more and more and more and more, right up until the point where I came across the Marketing Academy. And I thought, well, surely I can have a run at this. Why not? And my whole pitch to the team was basically going, I became GM at 30. I've got to be one of the youngest GMs out there. And whilst I back myself in terms of my, confidence and conviction, there was a lot that needed colouring in between. And so really in terms of the Marketing Academy for me, it has really helped me sort of color in all those dots and has helped me become the person that you see sat in front of you today.
Yeah, wow, what a story. And mate, congratulations that, you've come from that point of disbelief to one of such, self-belief. How do you go? You mentioned a turn of phrase that I'd like to pick up on, coloring in the blanks, right? How do you go about coloring in the blanks, particularly someone that has, a neurodiverse challenge, right? That has to be integrated into their way of practicing both professionally and personally.
It all goes back to, I'm sure there's a proper word for it, but just being totally self-aware.
Okay.
And
what do you mean by that?
So what do I mean by that is just sometimes you have an idea of what you think your gaps are, but it's always worth bouncing that off someone to see. So I've been very lucky to have a really close set of mates who keep me honest in that way. And I've been very lucky throughout my career to have someone who can help me and honestly sit down and then candidly go, Chris, look, you're fantastic at this, this, and this. This is your superpower. But here's where the colouring in is. And here's how we can help you. And whilst some parts of it is good, some parts needs work. And that's okay. And it takes a lot of humility. And, you got to swallow your ego a bit and be like, oh, man, I thought I was a gun at that. But you're not. And that's okay. Nor do I claim to ever have the answers. But I really do think it starts with just being totally self-aware. And the best way to get a good barometer of what that is to have a close set of trustees that you can bounce off.
And for those that might be listening in or watching going, yep, I'm picking up what you're putting down, but I don't know where to start in finding that support network, be it mentors, be it advisors, be it mates that you can kind of soundboard. What would be your guidance for them?
That's a fantastic question. And it was a place that I've been in before. And honestly, the best place to start is with yourself. And what I often do is, and you can probably see here, I've got a spider diagram. I would often just write stuff down and get stuff out of my own head. And that's the best place to start, is to start with yourself and go, here's where this is. And I go, oh, you know what? It's not going to hurt to have an opinion from this person. You might not like it, but hey, at least you're getting feedback. And that helps you colour in the dots and go from there, I reckon.
You mentioned feedback. I think feedback is one of those things. It's a bit of a double-edged sword. It's, be careful what you wish for, so to speak. How do you go, both personally in terms of you glamoring feedback and garnishing feedback, I should say, for yourself in your own development, but also in the teams that you lead? How do you go about creating, a feedback-rich or a feedback-forward culture?
Totally. And I think one important thing to notice, or to note even, is you've got to start off by creating a culture where it's constantly happening, even in the smallest minute bit. And there's one thing that Jules, our CEO at the Hallway, always says, is he kind of gives small compliments along the way to just let you know kind of a barometer of where you're standing, as opposed to waiting an annual year and then going like, okay, here's your feedback. And that's super important. And for anyone that knows me, I'm very much the same in this booth as I am in the pub, as I am on the footy field. And they'll know that I'll give them a very honest depiction of where I think improvement would be, whether it's right or wrong. And I think, Dan, that's kind of where the more I've lent into my, let's call it, authentic self, the better it's actually worked for me.
This concept of oneself, we've had a couple of other guests on the show talk about exactly that. And I'm a firm believer and a huge advocate for a single self. This fallacy that we compartmentalize, work Murph and, not work Murph. Why do you think that's such a core component to great leadership?
I mean, yeah, I'm sure there's several studies on it and what have you, but I guess I'll give you my...
I love that you went straight to data.
Yeah.
There's empirical evidence.
Oh, no, but I mean, there's always going to be people that go, well, what's he basing that on and all this sort of stuff. I was like, well, it's my own experience is what I'm basing it on. And I guess to introduce a concept to help me answer that question, one of the things that we spoke about in the Marketing Academy was this difference between your character and your persona, and thinking of your character as a seed within your persona. And the idea is to close that gap between your character and your persona.
Okay.
And to answer your question, if I remember correctly, is why is it important? Is you don't want to come across as deceptive, and it's so easily done, and so unintentionally easily done. To give you an example, I once had an agency leader years and years and years ago who turned up late to one of my reviews, and I go, well, this guy clearly doesn't give a shit about me, and things like that. And whereas, I always make it a point of mine, and as you guys will have seen today, like I always get 10 minutes early. If I'm on time, I'm late. And that's kind of one of the staples I hold to show that to people like I genuinely care all the time and a pillar about me and my authenticity.
If I were to ask your team, you've touched on, a pillar or a philosophy of who you are as a professional. If I were to go to your team and ask them when you're not in the room, what are the hallmarks of Chris? Like what type of leader is he? What do you think they'd tell me?
He enjoys having fun in the face of a challenge.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
What else?
That's a great question. And how do you answer that without sounding really pompous? I think. Look, I mean, I guess for me, what a lot of people say is Chris always seems to have an answer, whether it's totally right or totally wrong. I take a position, stick with it, and go with it.
Mm-hmm.
And I think a lot of people respect that. We've been in so many businesses before where you get analysis paralysis. Oh, should we do this? Should we do that? And it's actually more hurtful, wasting the time before you make the decision. I think a lot of my team will go, you know what? Credit to Chris, right or wrong. He makes a call with the information he has at the time and just goes with it. And if it goes all wrong, he holds his hand up and goes, you know what? Wasn't the best call, but let's course correct and let's work together and figure it out.
Can you give me an example of a time where that's gotten you into trouble and you've had to grow from it?
There are times where, for a certain client, this was years and years and years ago, I thought that there was a potential opportunity to pitch some proactive ideas around an idea that was basically going to help them extend the lifetime value of their customers. It's around doing loyalty and all this sort of stuff. And it's quite naive of me to kind of, I was like 26 at the time, being like, oh yeah, let's just pitch a loyalty program. They'll love it. It'll be amazing. All this sort of stuff. And then I didn't sense check it with anyone just because I got on with the client quite well. And I was kind of his man to help get shit done. I just thought, I'll try it and I'll look like a hero.
It's a great idea.
It's a great idea. And he just goes like, Murph, like, do you know how much these things cost? He's like a super experienced marketer, like his experience at the time doubled mine, even trebled mine.
Yeah.
And I'd go like, yeah. So I think we should do this because your clients would love it. Sorry, not your clients, your customers would love it. Here's all this. And he's just like, mate, like the operating reality is we could never do anything like this. And to be fair, he gave me credit in terms of my, I guess, conviction to go, I'm trying to realize a place that would help him achieve his business goals, but it's just not realistic.
Yeah.
And then my boss found out. Yeah. He was like, what are you doing? Are you nuts? Yeah. Like, why'd you have that conversation? I thought, well, if it came off, I'd look like a hero.
But I think we've all been in those situations where you hook into an idea and you're just unwavering from them. If you look back on your development personally and professionally as a senior leader, what's some of the stuff that you've let go of, like the baggage that you've jettisoned along the way?
Being my own worst enemy.
Ooh, okay. Let's have a chat about that. What do you mean by that?
So early on when I was growing up, I took a lot of guilt for feeling, I guess, I don't know, it sounds weird, Dan. I kind of felt guilty I almost felt like I was burdening people around me by not being as smart as the other kids and getting on. I felt burdened the fact that I had to ask the teacher 3 or 4 times what to do. I felt burdened a bit like on my family, having to get like extra lessons and tutoring and all that sort of stuff. So as a result, I'm inherently very hard on myself. And there will not be a critic that is harder than myself on myself. And so over the years, what I've come to find is like, whilst that's been a good, I guess, barometer for excellence, it's a terrible habit. You end up second guessing yourself, third guessing yourself and tripping yourself up. And you just go, you know what? Like, I am who I am. And yeah, man, I'm going to make mistakes, but hey, let's just go ahead. And that's okay. And I've translated that into many areas of my life, not just professionally, relationships, sports, everything. And, even I've played rugby league at quite a high level. And I guess that's kind of, being in that professional sports environment, that's not ideal for that because it kind of categorizes that a bit more and amplifies that a bit more. But I think for me, I've been able to, as I've grown up, kind of step back and go, okay, it's okay to have those thoughts, but then I now have the presence of mind to stop and go, well, you don't need to do that.
Yeah, let go of the inner critic.
Mate, it's good enough. Yeah.
What else?
What else have I let go of along the way? Just previous fuck-ups.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah. Massively. Like I would kind of, I would look at some things and be like, oh, I've gone down this road before. It's not quite as good. But then I go like, well, man, like you got to fail forward. Some of my best learnings have been taking big risks. And I've gone, you know what? Like, I've got enough of what I know. Is it going to matter in 6 months? No. So go ahead and don't let it bear burden on your mind.
You mentioned, what was it, 15 when you got diagnosed?
Correct.
Are there times where that 14-year-old boy rears his ugly head again and, at the back of your mind starts giving you the narrative?
Oh, mate, 100%.
Yeah.
So the first time I walked into day one of boot camp at the Marketing Academy, walked in, I'm like the youngest one in there by like 8 years, 7 if you ask a couple of my close mates on there. But like, I go, oh man, like, you know, and then my buddy I got paired up with is someone who is an incredibly distinguished member of the industry. Like I've read like articles, I've seen interviews about them. I've not had like one interview at that point. So I was like, oh man, like that, you kind of go, are you good enough? Like, do you think you can you know, you don't get some of the terminology that they're talking about. Are you worried? All these horrible little thoughts, but they create such an amazing safe space for you to voice that. And what actually is amazing, Dan, and when you truly just let go of it all, is people are having the same thoughts.
Yeah.
You know?
We're all in it together.
Exactly.
Yeah.
You know, I got paired up with this one guy who was for one of the exercises where you had to like kind of pitch yourself, not pitch yourself, pitch like a service, and it's all about presentation craft and what have you. And the guy I was up against is a very senior agency leader who's, you know, started and sold his own agency, done all this sort of stuff. And I'm like, bricking it. I'm like, okay, my presentation's got to be excellent, and rehearse everything to like the last detail. And he was like, mate, can I just say, before he'd even start, he's like, I'm pretty nervous about this. I was like, what do you mean? He's like, oh, I'm paired with you. And I go, why are you scared of me? And he's like, oh, you're coming for my job. I was like, no, like, but it's all this crazy sort of things that go through your head where you go, remove all of that. And, you know, it was like totally fine. And I've just started realizing that over the years, Dan, that stuff doesn't serve me.
Yeah.
So just get on with it.
I think that's that level of self-awareness, certainly that I'm hearing, I think is an incredibly powerful skill set. How do you go about cultivating? I mean, you mentioned self-awareness earlier, but as a muscle, and I truly believe that these things are muscles, right? You know, the well that the battery that you can drain in terms of your resilience is something that doesn't just, you don't flick a switch and it turns on. It's something that requires muscle memory. How have you gone about cultivating that? Because I think it's an amazing and a really dynamic journey that you've gone on. But, you know, sitting here, you ooze, you know, whether or not you know it, you know, you ooze this confidence, but in a, you know, I guess in an authentic and a humble way, you know, there's not an arrogance to it. How do you go about doing that for someone that, you know, again, for those particularly that might be sitting in that self-doubt, that are looking at you going, how do I master that skill set?
Absolutely. And fantastic question. And it's one word, it's belief.
Okay.
I keep coming back to this. It is about anchoring in a belief, and it's different to hope.
Okay.
Hope is kind of, you know, there's a famous quote, I don't know who said it, but hope isn't a strategy. Whereas with belief, it's thinking that something is true, even if it's not objectively speaking, and bloody gunning for it. And I've always just believed in myself and been very proud to believe in myself. And that's one thing that over the years, that whilst I've been like pushing this belief, like, yeah, I can do it. It's only now at 32, I kind of turn around and I go, man, like, just stop and be proud of what you've done for a bit. And because there was a point where I was like, okay, yeah, marketing, kind of, you know, no disrespect to that, but I was kind of like, okay, that's done. What next?
What next?
Yeah, this. What next? This. What next? And you're like, man, just slow down. You know, it's all good. And yeah, I guess that's where I get my energy from, Dan. Is believing in myself, believing that we're going to be good enough to pitch this idea in, believing that we're good enough to work with these clients, believing that I'm good enough to sit here and have this conversation with you, believing that we can go on to be agency of the year X amount of times in a row, all kinds of things. And that's where I hinge it. And if you talk to anyone on my team or anyone who I've worked with over the years, Dan, I bet you anything that they will say, like, you know, probably maybe not articulated in this way, but Chris helped me believe in myself and what I was possible of doing. And the way I've done that is just by doing it myself and saying, hey, this is what worked for me. I think it can work for you.
With all superpowers, does that create a blind spot?
Yeah.
Yeah?
Yeah, totally. And, you know, you put the blinkers on, you go, and I guess that's something that I'm still wrestling with to this day to a certain degree, is going, is my absolute conviction and belief in myself or wherever I'm pursuing blinding a critical blind spot here? But I guess what I've managed to do, definitely in the last 18 months, is surround myself with good people who would call me out and have, I guess, feel comfortable in saying that to me. Go, Murph, hang on. Have you thought about this? And be like, okay, cool. Let's go again. But whereas back in the day, I'd just be like, you know what? I'm going to do this. Bang. I'd go and it'd be like, my journey would be like this. Whereas I think now I have the right sort of group of people around me to kind of help me keep it a bit more narrow and focused.
I love that. And I think, you know, none of us are on an island, right? We're only as good as the people to our left and to our right. I'd love to get your perspective on what I call sharpening the axe, or refining your craft by another name. I'm sure for some of us it's actually really easy to learn it, but I suspect that you'd have to take a slightly more scenic route in keeping your toolkit sharp and consistently learning, walking the path of the marketing academy, for example. What are your principles for ongoing learning, for, filling your cup, your knowledge and your skills?
Well, I'd say I have one principle and then a bunch of actions that follow.
All right, let's go through that.
So I'd say the principle is, if you want to be the best, you've got to work with the best.
Okay. And
it's actually amazing that if you reach out to people are actually quite receptive. As long as you don't go like, hey, can I pick your brains, and clearly trying to like copy the notes, but you go, mate, love what you've done with X. I think I could offer an interesting perspective on this. I'd love to buy you lunch and chat over it. And I've used that, let's call it like cold template type thing, and amalgamated it a bit to different people who either through the marketing academy or just in the industry. Yeah. People are incredibly warm to it. We're all mates at the end of the day. It's a small industry. Everyone kind of crosses over.
And people are generous, with their time and their skills and their effort.
Yeah.
We had a guest on this series come in, and she said, you had this brilliant quote, if you're the smartest person in the room, you're in the wrong room. And
exactly.
I love that. I think it's such a great philosophy on, always look up, so to speak. What do you think, looking forward, right? So as we move from sort of the road paved to the road ahead, what do you think the skills for senior leaders in this space are going to be, that are going to set apart the cream from the crop?
Yeah, I think so. The slight bias talking agency side, I actually think it's resilience. And I think resilience is a skill. And the reason I say that is everything changes at such a rate. Within, let's call it like a, technology perspective, so to speak. Consumers are getting more fickle as we speak. Budgets are up and down. Yeah. Things are left and right. Economy is doing, there's so many factors. And
when you say resilience, can you go a little bit deeper or more specific? Resilience is this huge, of course, ecology of thought. What do you, when you say, you would look for resilient leaders, what do you mean by that?
I would say is having a growth mindset, I guess, is what I really mean by that.
Okay.
So if we look at a lot of advertising agencies, the actual business model of an advertising agency has not changed in the last 50 years. And I would say for us to survive and even thrive, you inherently need a growth mindset. So I guess if we look at resilience, and one pillar of that is having a growth mindset, I feel it's absolutely fundamental to what you need to do, because we need to adapt. We're a service-based industry. So that is what just don't be afraid of the work. There is going to be work ahead to figure out how we do it, but that's what keeps us in the game. It's every day is different, and that's why we love it so much.
Yeah, we at Distillery have a philosophy: embrace the pivot. Right? You just got to embrace the pivot.
Yeah.
And so you mentioned under that philosophy, then there's a series of actions.
So one of them, I guess, is around self-awareness. So I actually pencil in a self-check-in every probably, I try to do it every quarter, but it's probably more like every sort of 12 to 16 weeks. But it's where I sit down and I go, how are you tracking? Like, are you happy with the direction that you're going? What have you done that you're proud of? Where do you think needs more work? Where do you need to color in? Where are your knowledge gaps? And go from there. So I'd say that's one of the key actions within there. Number 2 is working on your network. Your network is your net worth. So keep meeting people. Keep the relationship going with people you've already met. Even if you don't want to seem transactional and just meet one person once and go like, oh, okay, I've got no value from you. I honestly, I keep my Wednesday evenings and my Thursday mornings and my Friday lunchtimes completely blocked out. And I try and fill them every week with someone from within the industry, potential client, whoever, to, because you never know where opportunities arise. And half the time it's about being present, Dan.
Yeah, I love that. I mean, that's a quite a significant effort, to, as you said, to farm the orchard, so to speak, and to really, draw from the community of practice that you operate in. Okay, so what else? So we've got self-check-in. Your network is your net worth. I like that.
Yep.
Got a good advertising brand there.
Yeah.
Anything else that sits under, cultivating that growth mindset?
And looking after yourself.
Okay.
So what do I mean by that? I mean, having a set, let's call it fitness routine, whatever you want to call it, whether that's a walk or whatever. I always, for example, what mine looks like, I aim to go to the gym 3 times a week. I don't go, I will go at 5 at this time and do it. I did that for like a year. Mate, it sucked. Like getting up at like 4:45 and all this sort of, mate, it was exhausting. You when you watch like this hustle culture bullshit and you're kind of like, oh yeah, I'll get the grind. And now I'm just like, whatever. Yeah. You know what, this morning I'm going to have a lie-in. But I kind of more have let's call it looking after yourself principles. So what brings you joy and gives you more energy? I like going to the beach.
Yeah.
So I'll try and do that at least 2 or 3 times a week. And that's after work or before work. And then I make sure I go to the gym. I make sure I'm eating well. You know, you're going out with clients and stuff, you're having nice lunches and what have you. But, you know, it's just about simple things like that. I almost liken it to being like a sports professional. You know how they look after their diet, their mental health, all that sort of stuff. What's to say we're no different? Our industry is just as intensive.
Yeah.
So, you know, you've got to look after yourself. And if you talk to anyone who has performed at the highest level, you know, they will do that, or at least try to do that. But Dan, by no means do I claim like, oh yeah, I smash 50 sit-ups here and do all that. Like, I try. And I'm okay with not hitting 100%. But at least if you set the bar relatively high and get near it, your benchmark will be way higher than other people.
Last one from me as we wrap up this illuminating chat. If you could go back to Murph 10 years ago, knowing what you know now, and give yourself some advice that would set you up for more success, I should say, than the success that you've earned, what would that be?
It wouldn't be so much advice. Well, I guess it would be advice. But what I would, if I was sat talking to myself from 10 years ago, sat opposite me, would be, Chris, you're in a never-ending game of belief. It's an infinite game of belief. I guess what I would say is take a moment to pick where you're going to invest your time and energy in, because not all of it will fill your cup. And yeah, I didn't have that presence of mind though all those years ago. And so that would be my thing for me is you know, be ruthless with the way you spend your energy. I guess is what underpins that, and what I would say to myself first.
What else?
Embrace your difference.
Okay.
Yeah, and you know, it's when you actually like break everything down. You know, I'd like, for example, there's always this like conception that people were like brought up in Dubai or Abu Dhabi are like absolutely minted and what have you. Like we're not. Yeah. You know, my family are like relatively humble in the grand scheme of things. You know, I only have 3 Lambos. No, I'm joking. But you know, be okay with that, and be okay with it. Like, mate, for example, when I rocked up at Grey London, I thought, oh, it'd be cool. I read somewhere in a book like, oh yeah, be distinctive and all this, like a leadership book. So I used to rock up with like a tie, and I got rinsed. You know, you go there, people are wearing like, everyone looks really cool and like fashionable, and just be like, you know, I actually really liked wearing a tie back in the day. I couldn't go back to wearing one now, especially in today's temperature. Yeah. But you know, even back then, I was like, oh my god, yeah, I need to fit the mold to other people to get ahead. Whereas now I'm quite happy being my total self. Chris Murphy you see here will be the same one you see at the pub, same one you meet out and about. And I'm totally cool with that. I'm very happy with that. So I'd say, to round that off, I would just say, mate, just be yourself. And if people don't like it, then they don't like it. And that's okay.
I love that. And that's a wonderful note to end on, mate. Thank you so much for joining us. It's been an absolute pleasure.
Dan, thank you so much.